All right. Good morning, everyone. Let's get started with our message for today. Message title, God-fearing. Back when I was in Long Island, New York, I think I talked about this not too long ago, but my father was a pastor of a small Chinese church there. And while we were there, we were borrowing space from a Baptist church. And I think that's a pretty common thing for churches to do, right? Especially smaller churches when you can't, afford a place of your own, can't find a place of your own. You usually try to borrow from another church. And this Baptist church, it was an old church. The building was really old. It looks like it had been there for a while. And most of the congregation members, they were all just, maybe around their 60s to 80s, and really there were just a handful of members left. Now, it may sound like a rather sad state of affairs to see a church kind of shrink down and dwindle to that state. However, we were able to, kind of better to get to know them better, right? Because they were just a small group of people, and so we could make it more of a feeling of a small family, right? This kind of church family. Eventually, we came to this point where my dad felt the call to come to Georgia and serve at this church, and so he had to tell everybody, his church as well as the Baptist church, that we were planning to move. Now, while we were planning to move, there was this one elderly couple. They were from India, and they invited us to dinner as a way of saying, a farewell gathering, and they cooked some of the meals from their homeland and allowed us to just share a meal in their home together one last time. Now, after we had the meal and we were kind of just talking, they asked, so where were we planning to go? Where were we leaving for? And we told them we were going to Georgia, right? And the man said, "Oh, Georgia, yes, I've been there several times before, and I've noticed that the people there are a lot more God-fearing." And it's kind of weird how some things kind of really just stick with you. I've said this before, but just some things, they just kind of stick in your mind, and you continue to remember them for years at a time, even though when you think about it, it wasn't really that significant. Like, when I think about that memory, and I think about everything that happened that night, I can't really remember much else. We had dinner. I can't remember what we ate. I remember it was good, but I don't remember what it was. But for the rest of the night, whatever we talked about, I don't remember a thing. It was just that one little thing that he said, that idea that they're in that place, people are more God-fearing. Gave me an expectation. Now that I think about it, it gave me an expectation for the future ahead. What can I really expect when I go there? Is there really a place where people would be more God-fearing? It kind of gave me that kind of curiosity. Is that really true? At that point, I had lived on Long Island for most of my life, about 22 years. And on Long Island, it's, mostly suburbs, and then on the weekends, our family would go to New York City for the Chinatown to go to all the market and the groceries. And so that's basically my whole world for 22 years, right? I learned everything I knew from the public school system. I went to college on Long Island. That was everything that I experienced. And so in my younger years, that's kind of just what I expected out of the United States. I just expected, since we're just one country, we're one big country, I didn't expect, too much difference from one part of the country to another part of the country. But now I was hearing, if you go down south, people are more God-fearing. People care more about God. And I was just wondering, what would that be like? And so when we did move down here, like even as we were just kind of traveling through the roads, I did feel that culture shock, right? I found that people did talk more about Jesus, talk more about God more openly than they did in New York. You can go to like a supermarket and just sometimes you can just find like a section of books that are aimed at Christians. You can drive down highways and along the small roads, and you might occasionally see a sign telling you, like, Jesus is coming, you got to repent. You can sit down at a restaurant and you could hear perhaps like a family or a group of people just praying out loud before a meal. You might even occasionally see people walking around with Christian t-shirts. And you can have a fast food restaurant like Chick-fil-A. I'd never experienced Chick-fil-A before when I was in New York. And I never expected there would be a restaurant that could actually close on Sundays because, Sundays is a big day for business. You expect everyone to just stay open just so they can have that business. But Chick-fil-A decided to close on Sundays, and that's a very interesting, strange thing for our society, for us as a people, right? And especially even if you just kind of just drive down some of these suburban areas, you might find quite a number of churches here and there. There are actually quite a lot of at least church buildings. For example, currently where I live, we live in like a fairly small neighborhood, and if you just head out to the exit of the neighborhood to the main road there, you'll find that there are just like 3 other churches just like right in front of where the neighborhood entrance is. It's kind of interesting. And it doesn't seem odd now because I kind of got used to it, just kind of living. Now if I wanted to, I could just walk to a church. But it felt odd when I first arrived because when I was growing up in the state of New York, Christianity felt like a secret club. It was like if you want to buy Christian merchandise, so to speak, like T-shirts and music and movies and videos and things like that, you had to specifically go to the little Christian bookstore that was in a dead shopping center. You just have to go there. There's like no one there but the Christian bookstore, and it's like in a tiny little basement there, and everything's just there, and everybody goes to that one little bookstore. Nobody really talked about Jesus unless there was like a big event, like a conference that showed up in town, then maybe people would be interested. There wasn't even like a Christian club in my high school. When I went to college, there was a Christian club, but it was only like 5 members, including me, and that was out of like 5,000 students. So, it really felt like, Christianity was like that secret club where only a few people kind of were interested and knew what was going on. And so now I really appreciate being able to, live in a place like this. Now, last weekend, I didn't really make a big deal out of it, but I was given the opportunity to check out a church up north. And when asked whether I would be flying or driving, I decided I wanted to drive. And there were 2 main reasons after I kind of looked at everything. First, I just kind of wanted to know if I could do it because I've never done like a really long road trip car ride by myself before, especially a 15-hour one. Normally, it would just be, if we went, it would be perhaps with a church or with my family. And with a group of people, you could maybe, switch off drivers every once in a while, so not everyone has to bear the brunt of it alone. But I just wanted to see if it was possible. Second, I kind of just wanted to see the current state of the country, right, with my own eyes. Certainly you could turn on YouTube and watch people record various parts of the country and various things. But it's always from their perspective. And regardless, they're going to be trying to record what they want to record and what they want to show to the world. I just wanted to see how it looks by itself. And so I just wanted to see the scenery and the people and just how things are. And, well, it's probably not the greatest sample size, but I went upward through Kentucky and Tennessee and Ohio. And in these few states that I drove across, you driving along the highway, you might see a truck with like a gospel message on like the back of the truck or on the side of the truck. I saw there was like one truck that had this really big bright cross on their window, like a light, a cross full of light, just like shining out their front window. And then occasionally I'll pass by and I'll see a car with, that little fish symbol on the back of it. And especially in these southern states, if you drive across like the major highways, you'll see the big billboards. And the big billboards are like, trying to talk about the message of Jesus and talking about, you got to repent, or talking about cultural issues and things like that. And so I also just randomly ate at a Chick-fil-A somewhere along the way. And as I sat down to eat my meal in the table in front, there were these two, church ministers, church leaders, kind of just having a meeting, talking about church matters and praying and eating. And I also stopped by Buc-ee's. I like to, whenever I go on these big car rides, I like to just stop by Buc-ee's just to kind of stretch my legs and have a lot of bathrooms that, I don't have to worry about not being able to just go to the bathroom instantly. And you go and they have this big, market area, and they still sell like Christian T-shirts and a lot of decorations with like Christian messages and verses and things like that. And so it feels like, as you're going through America, just like as it is, not as kind of the world tries to portray it or gives you that little glimpse of what they want you to see. I feel like there's still a good number of people that I would call, God-fearing. But even as we look at this term, God-fearing, what does that really mean? And so that's just kind of what I wanted to look in depth more at that topic for today. What does it mean to fear God? And why is it important for us as Christians to fear God? Now, in the book of Proverbs, you may have heard a couple of these really famous verses that are talking about this term. This is the fear of the Lord, right? For example, in Proverbs 1:7, it says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge, and fools despise wisdom and instruction." And Proverbs 9:10 says, "The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom, and the knowledge of the Holy One is insight." So when I think of the fear of the Lord or God-fearing, these are kind of like a couple of the go-to verses that I instantly think about. So basically, I mean, when you look at it, it's like basically telling you that whether you're seeking the beginning of knowledge or even just of wisdom, both knowledge and wisdom, you really have to start with the fear of the Lord. And I like the term. It sounds cool, but it's still a very unusual term, right? I mean, people don't really talk about this normally. We will typically think about it or maybe even talk about it more along the lines of a church setting, whether you're talking about it in a Bible study or, just like when I talked about my previous example where one of the Christians just told me, that place is going to be God-fearing, and like that's kind of just you need that kind of Christian culture before you can hear this term even being spoken. So usually, if we ever come across this term in Bible study or in a sermon, we might try to explain it, because not everyone is going to know what it means by the fear of the Lord. And this is primarily because when we talk about fear, right, in our English language, we're talking about something that's more, scary or terrifying. I remember watching a TV show years back. This is actually a pretty old TV show. I don't think they still have it around anymore. But there was a TV show called Fear Factor. I don't know if you guys have ever heard of Fear Factor. All right. Yeah, I imagine it's probably, there are probably no new episodes for it right now, but it's kind of a weird concept. When you hear the name, though, you already have an idea of what it's going to be about. So it's a game show. They're contestants, and they're trying to win a prize of money, right? And it's about challenging things that really test things that people normally fear. So they might have some pretty crazy stunts, right? They might have these contestants try to leap off a building, jump off from one building to another, or maybe they're just kind of, how they do it in the movies, you're hanging off the bottom of a helicopter. Maybe they might try to do something like that with, proper, I assume it's safe. Or they might do things that are just kind of, gross and disgusting and weird, like eating, live bugs, right? Some cultures do eat live bugs, but that's really weird for our culture, right? In America, nobody's going to want to eat live bugs. Or sometimes they might just like stick you in like a small space with lots of bugs, of like scorpions and spiders and all other creepy crawly critters. So these are, the things that we might associate with fear. These are things that we, that's when we think of the word fear, that's kind of what we're thinking about, right? That's the mental image, something terrifying, something horrifying. But we're given this term, fear of the Lord. Is that really the way we're supposed to view God, right? Something, or rather someone so terrifying that you kind of just want to run away, that you don't want to deal with it? Do you expect when people have a fear of the Lord that they all come to church really scared and out of their wits and just kind of trembling, trying to get in here? No, people don't come here like that, right? That's not how fear of the Lord really works. That's not what we're talking about when we talk about how to view God. After all, you'll notice, like if you read the Bible often and read all the different Bible stories, that sometimes, God reaches out to people, and when he reaches out to people, people do get scared by God, right? The idea of meeting God and perhaps dying because they see God is a terrifying thought, but usually God will immediately say, "Fear not," right? Don't be afraid. I'm not here to scare you. I'm here to just kind of give you a message that is important for you. So let me give one example of many. Genesis 15:1, early on in the Bible, God's speaking to Abraham, and immediately as he's speaking to Abraham, it says, after these things, the word of the Lord came to Abraham in a vision. "Fear not, Abraham. I am your shield. Your reward shall be very great." So that, again, this is just one example of many, of God telling people, do not be afraid, do not fear, whether he's talking about fearing him or fearing the circumstance that God is going to put him in. It's all about, don't be afraid. And so we're not supposed to be afraid of God in that sense. Yes, he's God. Yes, he's incredible. He's powerful. He's our creator, so he has the power to give life and to take it away. But he doesn't do all this so he can terrorize us in fear and make us submit to him in fear, because he's still ultimately also a good God, full of loving kindness and everlasting love. And so whenever I hear people talk about the fear of the Lord, I think some of the best ways to describe it is what they might call a reverent fear, right? Reverent as in respect, reverence. When you revere someone, it's just that really high level of respect, not just like a simple level of respect. The dictionary defines it as respect tinged with awe, right? So it's not just like being simply respectful, like, you know, how you would be respectful to perhaps people in authority, like your parents and your teachers. You want to be respectful towards them, but you're not going to give that kind of level of respect to them as you would to God, right? Or even how you respect people in general. You go out wherever you go, you're not going to be disrespectful. You want to be respectful to complete strangers. Even if you don't know them, you still want to be respectful, give a smile, give a greeting, keep the door open for them as they're passing by. That's just being generally respectful. And so that none of that is what we talk about when we talk about reverence. We're not really revering these people. We're just kind of being respectful. So there's this sense of awe to this idea of fear of the Lord. Like you're amazed by God. You're amazed by this person. You think, oh, they're so cool. You can't just help but respect them, and because you want them to favor you, you want them to like you, kind of like how some people do revere certain people, but it's only towards like really specific, people that they kind of essentially idolize, right? That term. And so that's kind of what we're doing here when we're talking about fear of the Lord, fear of God. We're revering God essentially as God, right? Understanding He's our creator, keeping everything into perspective, right? He's the creator of our universe. He gives us life. He watches over us. And ultimately, however, we also know that He is going to come with judgment. He's going to come with judgment at the end of days, and we have to respect that as well. And I think it's also that belief that, just God is real. You don't revere something that you don't believe in. But so we believe that God is real, and He's watching us. He's actually paying attention to us. He actually cares for us. He actually cares about what's going on in this world. And this belief that we are also accountable to God. God doesn't just do this for nothing. He's doing this because He's going to be very deeply invested in who we are and what we're doing. That's why I think when swearing an oath, that's also in the Bible, and I'm sure just people have always sworn oaths, even in ancient times. I think that made more sense back when people were really, believing in the supernatural. They're making this commitment under this belief that whatever they swear, it's serious. They believe that there's something that could happen, either a blessing or a curse, based on what they're swearing here. Because if there's no fear of the Lord, if there's no fear that someone is actually watching and paying attention, then these oaths are meaningless. It's just words to get people to feel better. You may as well not bother. But because there would be this mutual understanding, right? You and I, we both recognize that this is serious, and someone is watching from above and taking notice of this oath that we're going to make, that people would be committed to these oaths and say, well, we better not break it because we don't want to break this oath and disrespect the higher power that has allowed for this oath to take place. If you remember from Genesis, there would be a few times where we see people like Abraham and Isaac. They're afraid of staying at certain locations, right? And it's because of their wives. Their wives are beautiful. And in these situations, you may see that they lie about their wives. They say they're not married to their wives. so that they would avoid trouble, right? They had this fear that something bad would happen to them if they let people know that this is their wife. Now, coming more from a modern perspective, right, as we read the Bible and we read these kind of stories, we'd consider it bad behavior, irresponsible, lacking faith for them to do this. But whenever I read the Bible and I read all these situations with all these people, I like to give them the benefit of the doubt, because we don't know what kind of situation they were living in, right? Perhaps it was such a serious concern for them that they felt that they had to take these really weird and desperate measures. In one instance, Genesis 20:11, when Abraham does this and he gets found out, Abraham says, "I did it because I thought there is no fear of God at all in this place, and they will kill me because of my wife." So Abraham was explaining to the king that was affected by this situation because God was watching over them. He was explaining why he lied about his wife. And so, assuming, now I don't know what was really going on through Abraham's head, but assuming he's telling the truth here, basically he's saying, because there is no fear of God in this place, I am deathly afraid they're going to kill me because of my wife. Once again, just thinking about this situation, is he being truthful? Probably. Because we don't really know what it was like living in those times. In this story in particular, this is only like a chapter or two after the situation of Sodom and Gomorrah, right? So if he knows like how places like Sodom and Gomorrah are, and he know because of his nephew Lot, and we all know that story, how else would he feel about places in general that don't have the fear of God? Like, you know, he can't tell if they're all going to be like Sodom and Gomorrah, where, you know, people just do whatever they want. And so, you know, we also see another similar situation in the book of Judges. And this is even much later in history, right? This is, I don't know how long, probably several hundred years. And this is this is an Israelite town, right? There's an Israelite town, and it mirrors, if you ever read that story, I'm not going to talk about it, but it mirrors what happens in Sodom and Gomorrah. And that's kind of the situation in the book of Judges. There's no fear of God, even though they know about God. There's no fear of God. And so it turns into a terrifying place where people can do whatever they want. They will do whatever their heart desire, even the most wicked and sinful things that you can imagine. And even in modern day times, right? We think about the cities that we have, and in the news you occasionally hear about crimes and violent crimes. And I imagine that all cities at least have certain areas. There are always certain areas where people don't want to go because they know it has a reputation of being a terrible place. Not everyone has the luxury to escape such terrible situations, but if you're visiting that city, people will warn you, don't go to so-and-so because there's a lot of crime there. You have no idea what's going to happen if you go. So if there's some reason to go to a place that you feel like you have to go to this place, but you know there's no fear of God there, what kind of desperate measures would you take to ensure that you survive? So that's kind of how I view, in light of that understanding, how Abraham and Isaac dealt with the situations in their place, because they don't know what's going to happen or how these people would react, since they have no fear of God like they did. So when we talk about the fear of the Lord, it's, like I said before, it's knowing that God is watching over us and holding us accountable for what we do. And if we do that, if we have that, thought, if we have that just kind of general way of life, of that fear of the Lord, people tend to be more careful. People tend to be more respectful. because they know they can't just get away from the watchful eye of God. If people don't fear the Lord, then, I mean, like we see in the Bible, like we see on the news, everything gets turned upside down. You don't know what's going to happen. You don't know how to understand what these people are going to do. As the younger generations of this country continue to lose their faith in God, we see that, rising atheism, agnosticism. They lose that fear of God. And we're already seeing the results of that, right? You see that random things of violence, and they will just do as they please, just like it says in the book of Judges, everyone is right in their own eyes. Everyone will do what is right in their own eyes because they don't fear the Lord. The true standards of morality, the laws of the perfectly good God of this universe, they're just ignored, flat out ignored. They don't believe them. They don't trust in them. And what you see is the rules will just simply change whenever the culture wants it to change. People will just start doing whatever they want and feel without, considering, the issue of being under God. So, as I've explained, believers and followers of Jesus Christ, we fear the Lord in this manner. We trust that God is a good God. We trust that he will bless those who love him, and there will be consequences for those who hate him and disobey him. He will judge everyone at the end, and that's why we should strive to live in a way that pleases him, and we're striving in a way that just is being obedient to his word. However, this is how we as believers should consider, the fear of the Lord. But, everyone is going to ultimately fear God in one way or another, right? Lord Jesus says this in Luke 12:4-5. I tell you, my friends, do not fear those who kill the body, and after that have nothing more that they can do. But I will warn you whom to fear. Fear him who, after he has killed, has authority to cast into hell. Yes, I tell you, fear him. Now, if you are not on the side of the Almighty God, if you do not seek his kingdom, his righteousness, how should you feel about this idea of God, right? This is where the word fear can turn into the word, the fear that we're used to thinking about in the English language. This is the part where one should dread meeting God, right? Because God is the same God in the Old Testament and in the New Testament. And yes, there is love and mercy and grace. Yes, it is good and wonderful. But that love and mercy and grace become much more amazing, and we appreciate it more when we realize what he's delivering us from, right? His wrath is coming. His judgment will eventually come. And so for salvation to exist, for us to appreciate that salvation, we have to realize what we're being saved from. And we see how terrible sin can be in the Old Testament, right? We see its far-reaching consequences. We see how difficult it is for the human race to survive, to do what is right, how hopeless and powerless we are without God trying to do his work in the world. So without God, this world would be very different, would feel very different. And ultimately, we always ask the question, why must we speak this truth, this reality of hell? After all, nobody likes it. Nobody wants to hear about it, right? But even if we ignore it, what good is it, right? We live in a world of suffering, war, hunger. Should we simply ignore those things just because they're unpleasant, just because nobody finds them comfortable to talk about? It doesn't change anything. It only makes things worse, right? We have the solution. We have a salvation. But if we don't believe in the judgment, why should we care about this deliverance? So we have that choice to make. And so the question is, who do you fear, right? Do you fear God? Because if you don't fear God, you are likely fearing something else or someone else. Do you fear God or do you fear man? Now, you may not think that you fear others, right? But is that true? Like, do you care about what others say about you? Do you care about how others view you? And if you care about such things, does not influence the way you act, the way you behave. That which controls how you think and move, would you not consider some element of fear to it? Today, we no longer talk about, or simply talk about, the man who will kill. They're still there, but in our culture, especially in our country, we're more concerned about the man who can control our reputation, whether they build it up or hurt it. We live in a time of finding worth in how others view us. Right? That's why people chase after all those views and likes on social media. Right? They're just trying to impress people, and they'll do really crazy, embarrassing, sometimes even illegal things just to impress strangers online. These aren't even people they know, but they don't care, because it's controlling their lives through this essentially fear of man, just fearing them in the sense that this is how we want them to view us, and so we'll do whatever it takes to get them to view us in this favorable manner. And so many, on the flip side, right, many are afraid to speak about faith in public, and maybe even in private with their friends and family, because you might lose your friend if you talk to them about Jesus. You might be seen as weird, you might be considered as uncool, or you might be labeled something by everybody for the rest of your life. But how much does that really matter to you? When the end of the world arrives, or when you meet God a bit earlier, what's going to be your excuse as to why you didn't do what God told you to do? But if we live under this fear of the Lord, it sets us on the straight and narrow path, leading to the blessed life, the life of everlasting love and joy. Just to end, I'm going to read Ecclesiastes 12, 13, and 14. And it says, "The end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. For God will bring every deed into judgment with every secret thing, whether good or evil." So I'm going to close in a word of prayer. Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you for just all you've done for us, your word, teaching us to live by your ways. And I just pray, oh Lord, that we would fear you, that we would trust in you and live our lives in accordance with your word, knowing that ultimately you are the one that matters, and you give us life, you give us purpose, you give us hope. And I just pray, oh Lord, that we would respect that, we would honor that, and we would glorify your name in everything we do. In Jesus' name I pray, amen.